Today on the newscast, the International Criminal Court comes after Israel for alleged war crimes. What's the jurisdiction here? And could the United States soon find itself in this global court's crosshairs? Get all the breaking details coming up. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. It's an Israel hater's dream. This week, the International Criminal Court announced that it will be investigating Israel for alleged war crimes against the Palestinians. Now, this ICC investigation covers three areas. Number one, supposed war crimes committed by Israeli soldiers during the 2014 Operation Protective Edge against Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Number two, Israeli settlements, so-called Israeli settlements, not only in Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland, also known as the West Bank, but in Jerusalem as well, the ancient and ancestral capital of the state of Israel, apparently building a home in Jerusalem where the Jewish people lived over 3,000 years ago is now considered a war crime by the International Criminal Court. And the third area they will be investigating Israel for is in 2018, April 2018, there were these massive riots along the Gaza-Israel border with thousands, tens of thousands of Palestinians storming the border quite literally and attacking Israeli soldiers and carrying out terror along that border. But there you have it, folks. The International Criminal Court investigating Israel for alleged war crimes. Now, it will also investigate Hamas. They announced this week. That's a much easier case to prove, I think. Hamas war crimes against innocent men, women, and children. After all, this is a designated terrorist organization, but they're coming after Israel. Now, the judge who announced it this week is a judge at the ICC by the name of Fatou Bensouda. Now, she is a hardcore leftist, and she is actually leaving that position in June and being replaced. So some thought, maybe she will not pursue this investigation against Israel, which she has been talking about for a while. For some 5 years, she's been laying the groundwork for this. Remember, again, as I mentioned, Operation Protective Edge took place in 2014, almost 7 years ago, the summer of 2014. So Fatou Bensouda has been planning this investigation for some time, and she is so committed to it that she's basically passing it off to her successor, who moves into that position as a judge at The Hague in June of 2021. A little bit of background here. You might be wondering, what the heck is the International Criminal Court? Hey, I'm an American. I only answer to American courts, you might be saying. Or I'm a Brit, I'm a German, I live in Africa, wherever you are. Here's what the International Criminal Court is. It was founded in 2002 as part of something called the Rome Statute. 123 nations are now a party to this International Criminal Court. As I mentioned, it's based in The Hague, in the Netherlands, where a lot of international bodies have their home base. 123 countries are a party to this court. 18 judges from a broad variety of backgrounds from different global locations sit on this court, and the budget is, I believe, somewhere in the ballpark of $180 million annually, and a lot of the main funders for this International Criminal Court are Western European nations. Britain and Germany are among the biggest financiers of the ICC. Now, they were founded in 2002 ostensibly to hold individuals, by the way, not nations. They don't come after nations, they come after individuals in nations, leaders, military officials who are committing war crimes and acts of genocide. Sounds great in its concept, right? But the problem is, this is a global court with, in their view, a global jurisdiction. Big problems when it comes to national sovereignty. The United States, for instance, is not a party to the ICC. We are not a member nation there. Israel is not a member nation there either, nor is Russia, China, India, and some other pretty prominent nations. They're not a part of this International Criminal Court. All of these nations have expressed serious concerns, and rightfully so, over sovereignty. The ICC, for instance, right now, in terms of a U.S. perspective, What's the history with the United States? Well, number one, right now the ICC, again, Fatou Bensouda, is spearheading an investigation reportedly of U.S. soldiers for alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. So the Trump administration had a very interesting reaction to this. Number one, they revoked Fatou Bensouda's visa. And secondly, the Trump administration declared this investigation of U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan as an emergency and actually enforced sanctions against the ICC and anyone linked to the ICC. Man, do I miss those days of moral clarity. But that's what the Trump administration did. The Biden administration, I expect, to take a more conciliatory tone, although they have come out, to their credit, strongly against this ICC announcement this week that it will be investigating Israel. And Israel, of course, has had a very strong reaction. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, other Israeli leaders have said this is an outrage, it's anti-Semitism, and they are correct. Another thing to keep in mind here, folks, as Israel and the United States are being investigated, which, by the way, have the strictest rules of engagement in the world. I would argue the U.S. military and the Israeli military have, without a doubt, the most stringent rules of engagement. They go to great pains, extraordinary lengths, to avoid civilian casualties. I'd say, and I don't say this lightly, more so than any militaries in world history, do the United States and Israel have absolutely strict rules of engagement, which many times probably work to their detriment on the battlefield, even as they are pursuing terrorism or terrorists. But these are two nations that actually put human rights at the forefront. Imagine that. But on the flip side, the International Criminal Court, while its onus, its focus is on the U.S. and Israel, where are the investigations into Iran or Syria or other notorious human rights violators who have committed war crime after war crime over the years? Crickets chirping. Nothing there. But hey, let's haul Israel and the U.S. before a tribunal in The Hague. Now, they can't do that on its face. When we talk about why is this so significant, they don't have jurisdiction to do that because the U.S. and Israel, again, are not members of the ICC. But in their view, they can. They see themselves as a supreme global court and global body. Again, this is a globalist dream, right? Now, they are not formally linked to the UN. They operate independently, but the two do work together from time to time and have common interests. Here's why it is so significant and why it is so problematic, folks. Say, number one, again, they come after individuals, not nations. They come after specific individuals in those nations, which they charge with war crimes. Say a president, an American president, an Israeli prime minister, an American Joint Chiefs of Staff leader, someone from the Pentagon, an Israeli defense minister, an Israeli chief of staff of the Israel Defense Forces, not only Israel and America, an African nation. The ICC has had many convictions of African officials, Latin America, where no matter where you are, you consider yourself a sovereign nation. Say that leader from your nation who the ICC has accused of war crimes, say he or she is traveling internationally, could they be picked up and arrested and hauled before the ICC in The Hague? And if the ICC finds Israel guilty of war crimes, that stigma, the Israel haters, the anti-Semites will use that like a cudgel, and they will say, see, we told you, Israel is a war criminal, and now an international body has officially ruled that Israel, the Israelis, are war criminals. It all chips away and adds to the anti-Israel echo chamber. And the thing is, folks, it's a lie. Israel does it. You have to fight the public relations battle if you are Israel. You would think the facts on the ground speak for themselves. I've been on the ground many, many times. I've been along that Israel-Gaza border, including about 2 years ago. I visited an Israeli community, a beautiful Israeli community in southern Israel, not even a mile from the Gaza border, a kibbutz called Nerim. Now, in Nerim, I visited the home of Adele Raymer. She is a Israeli, a pro-Israel advocate who has sounded the alarm in the media over the years about the Hamas threat and Palestinian Islamic Jihad threat coming out of Gaza. literally in her backyard. I mean, less than a mile from her home. Got to hear her compelling story and also visit her bomb shelter. That's right. Every home in her community must have a bomb shelter. Check out this clip from the Watchman TV show.
So when the incoming alert sounds, the red alert sounds, I have between 0 to 10 seconds to get from wherever I am in the house into this room.
That's not very long, Adele.
It's not at all, and I don't always make it if I'm in the bathroom, if I'm in the shower. I don't make it in time. And then when I get here, I have to close the iron door window and then close that window as well.
Yeah.
And then I'm safe.
Then and only then. And God forbid, like you said, if you're in the bathroom, 0 to 10.
No, I don't get here. If I'm in the middle of the shower, I don't get here in 0 to 10.
But this is your safe room.
But this is my safe room.
And every home in the community has one.
Every home within 7 kilometers of the border has to have a room that is basically a bomb shelter. This is the mortar pieces, the shrapnel that I found in my room. It's really sharp. I mean, it doesn't look like anything, but if this is speeding, it could
cause a lot of damage, though. It is sharp and it's flying out of an explosion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People have been killed by shrapnel many times.
Absolutely. In fact, 2 people were killed in my community by shrapnel.
In visiting Nareem and talking to Adele Reamer, I try to put myself as an American in her shoes in that difficult situation where Israelis in southern Israel are living under this constant threat of rocket fire, scooping up their kids and running into bomb shelters. I imagine, again, I'm coming from an American perspective here, I imagine living in Minnesota and being bombarded every day with rockets from Canada, or living in southern Texas and being bombarded from Mexico every day with rockets and missiles. Folks, put yourselves in their shoes and you get an idea of what they are up against in southern Israel and why this international criminal court investigation is so bogus. I do not believe Israel will cooperate with it. Again, they are not a member nation, so they have no obligation to cooperate with it. But this is a very calculated strategy by the enemies of Israel to put a dent again in Israel's image to the world. And it's almost more, yes, as I mentioned, there is the threat of arrests, but it's almost more of a public relations victory or battle for them against Israel in their minds. And that's mainly why they are doing this. We have the physical jihad against Israel, the likes of Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and all the rest. But we also have that diplomatic jihad, I guess you would call it, by the likes of the Boycott, Divest From, and Sanctions Movement, BDS for short. You can kind of lump the ICC in along with that crowd. And remember, as an American, hey, very slippery slope. They're targeting Israel now, but could American soldiers and American leaders be next? Again, the investigation is underway for alleged American war crimes in Afghanistan, but I wonder if they will bring the Taliban in Afghanistan up for war crimes. I won't hold my breath waiting for that. Folks, we always like to end here on the Watchman Newscast each day with some words of encouragement. Today we will go to Psalm 18, verse 2, which says, "The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer, my rock, in whom I take refuge." Israelis can sleep well at night knowing that the Lord is their rock. Coming against the ICC, Hamas, and all the rest, the Lord is their rock, their fortress, and their deliverer. Not only Israel, but for every believer, no matter where you are. I am a follower of Jesus, and I know that God is my rock and my stronghold in times of trouble, the kind of times that we are living in right now. So, thanks for joining us today on the Watchman Newscast. Until next time, God bless you, and remember, never